For many of you, this is a year of last. Okay? So, this is the last class. We are going to do a round off of the subject and we're going to practice. Yes. I hope that you've been able to study or to advance in your studies for subject. And we hope that throughout this year you have been able to develop your cultural consciousness, your critical thinking skills with all the tools and questions and source analysis, and that you are able to understand better the world. Now, before we go into the revision, let's review some dates. Yes? Remember this, the second term exam. It is written for all the students who missed or failed the first term exam, and for students who are conditional. And it is oral for students who passed the first term exam. The date, the written is on Saturday the 18th. Yes, this is the exam. And we will be studying. Yes. And the oral for you is on Thursday the 23rd or the 30th. Yes. And remember, those who do a written exam on the 30th. No. Yes, on the 30th, we will be giving marks. Yes. So remember, the ones who are doing the written, who wants your exam back and you have the feedback, come on the 30th. Feedback. Now, the classrooms, well, in the information we shared, we have already the classrooms for the written, and the classroom of oral is this one. Because here we check attendance, and then we tell you but the oral starts here because we need to check attendance. Because maybe you register for the oral, and then you can remember, topics, all the topics covered between the first term exam and the second term exam, which is 23 today. 23. And characteristics. The written is individual. You will be given 2 questions, and you will have to choose one of those 2 questions and answer it analytically and critically, and you have 2 hours. And the oral exam, you enter in groups of 5. Each group will give each group about 30 minutes. So the idea is that each student will come, yes, you have the topic, you have some time to prepare your answer, and then you have your time to develop. The idea is that the whole process will last about 6 minutes. Yes? And you already know the date. Remember, you come at 8, because at that time you check attendance and we tell you your first group, second group, third group, Now, the makeup. For everybody, the makeup is oral. Whether you did an oral, second term exam, or written one, the mode is oral. It is on Thursday, the 6th of November. This classroom, yes, the topics included for those doing the makeup of the second term exam, with 12 to 23, those doing the makeup for the first term exam, between groups 1 and 11. And the methodology is similar to the oral term exam. Groups of 5 students, each group will have 60 minutes, and the share will be organized at the beginning of the session. Okay? Do you have any questions in relation to term exam or makeup? No? We are tough. Has everybody registered? Very good. Very good. Okay? Yes. Remember that you have 2 more activities. Yes. Okay, and this is for you to know. So today is next week is completely virtual. We are not meeting, yes, but we will be meeting with those doing the written exam on Saturday. Okay? Then we are meeting on the 23rd for the oral with some, on the 30th for the oral with others. And remember, this is when we're handling the written exam. And then the makeup's on the 6th. What I need, and you're finished. Okay? So now, look, this is the macro After the Victorian.
During the Victorian
The
period.
Victorian period. We started in the 19th century, yes, in the Victorian period, and we reached when?
Today.
Today. Yes, with Trump and Biden. Yes, and remember that during the second part of the year, we didn't follow the chronological order, but we analyzed different cultural aspects. What cultural aspects? Racism, regionalism, education, globalization, and then you will see the visual arts. Sorry, remember that we will upload. Well, this class is already uploaded for you to work with. It won't be included in the short exam, but it will be included in the final exam. Don't forget that it is the final exam. Yes? And which countries were the main focus during the first term?
The USA and
The USA and the UK. And the second term?
Canada, Ireland.
Canada, Ireland, UK, and the US. Yeah, we are in. Very good. So now, what we are going to do, well, these are the different activities we'll do throughout the year. So you see how the asynchronization, so the presentations uploaded to the perfect class will complement the first section. Yes? So with intercultural education, cultural content, mini seminars by international assistants, education that today she will be speaking about education in the USA. For example, we saw the UNO Malvinas War. Many of you participated in the COIN in the Philippines, yes, and we have intercultural workshops, even though they are mainly related to cultural ones. Some of you went to this workshop in Cappuccino or they were related to the program. Then the autonomous and class work, Padlet, questionnaires, critical thinking with the impersonation based on personal reflection and analysis of sources and the work report. And then with Consuelo mainly to focus on effective communication, how to communicate your ideas effectively in writing and in an oral way with the critical writing workshop and the speaking workshop. Now, how are we going to organize the class? First, we're going to analyze together some sources that relate to the first part of the year to see if you remember anything from the first part of the year. And then you work with sources related to the second part. Yes, that is what you are studying now. So, if you look at the first source, what is the source about? What country is it related to? What do you think? What period? Yes, it reads the donor hall, national insurance against sickness and disablement, Mr. Lloyd George, national health insurance, support the liberal government in their policies social space. Okay, it's related to the growth of the welfare state in the UK, specifically what period? First World War. What? Julieta? Around the First World War. Around the First World War. Why? How do you know? Okay, first you have Lloyd George. Yes. Apart from that, Lloyd George belongs to which political party? To the Liberals. When did the Liberals govern? When were they in power? Right, relate this to, you mentioned, to welfare, to welfare and to what else? It's related to what we saw the first day of that. What philosophy?
Liberalism.
Liberalism. Yes, which stage of liberalism would this one belong to? So if it is social liberalism, which stage of liberalism?
The third stage.
The third stage. It is new.
The new liberalism.
Late Victorian period. So early Victorian period is what philosophy? Okay, liberalism or Benthamism. The second stage, philosophical radicalism, and during philosophy, as a consequence of the influence of philosophical radicalism, legislation was passed that led to the emergence of what states? The social service state. And we associate the new liberals with which pieces of reform? Or what With money. Okay? With money. So we see that philosophy legislation in the UK. What about the USA? What ideas were developed in the USA during this period?
Darwinism.
Okay, social Darwinism a little bit before, and what was the behind social Darwinism in relation to state intervention? The survival of the fittest, so no state intervention. Because state intervention would lead to the survival of the fittest. Okay? So there's no legislation passed during this period reflecting in a way this period of no state intervention. And then you mentioned progressivism, very good. And what was the idea behind progressivism? Was no state intervention?
Not to address the social problems.
As a consequence of what?
Also, Darwinism.
Now, industrialization and urbanization. Yes, there was the need for this progressive to address the social consequence of industrialization and urbanization. Yes, and they were for reform, for the state, for legislation, but was not legislation. Yes, and with the progressive emergence of what state in the United States? Service. Remember that the order is always the same. First service, then security, and then very good. So, 19th century begins and the 20th century. 1911. This one? Nice. Wilson. It's Wilson. Okay? What can you tell me about Wilson? Okay, he was president of the United States when what period? Okay. He was the president during, yes, and won the war. Okay? And what can you tell me about Wilson? He was an idealist. Idealism was his philosophy. Why was he idealist? Okay, so he believed in this idea of putting an end to all wars. Yes. And he said, well, remember that the position of the United States in relation to the war at the beginning was isolation. Yes, putting an end to the war. But then he said, we must enter the war to make the world safe. Okay, yes, but idealism, making this world that is a peaceful world without wars, yes, where democracy thrive, that was his idealism. Okay, and then once the war was coming to an end, he made a proposal to create this organization. Okay, that's why we're okay, yes, he was here. On the opposite side of France, because France wanted to
Destroy
make Germany convey everything and the position was quite different. But he proposed this League of Nations. And what the argument showed you in relation to the League of Nations? How do you know? Well, this is the opinion of the cartoonist, yes? Why? It's a bubble, okay? And what do you tell me about the bubble?
It's permissive.
Okay.
They are insane.
They were, they say, yes, they look useful, yes, but they are very fragile. Or this is the idea of the cartoon. It was very fragile.
Also, it portrays the fact that it's not part of his idealism.
It's idealism, the idea of this organization in which everybody will participate, self-interest aside, to create a better world. Yes, democratic, free trade for everybody. Okay, self-determination, etc. So, the idea was also quite idealistic. was the aim of the League of Nations? The general aim.
To end all many conflicts.
Okay, so to prevent the outbreak of another World War. That is the general aim. Then you have economic aim, social aim, political aim, and civil aim. To what extent was the League of Nations successful? To small extent. Why? Because another war broke out. And what other way? Very good. Important countries, yes, were not members. For example, the USA eventually was not a member, so this had an impact on the working. Hygiene problems in these countries. Any other idea? Why is Spain?
The Great Depression.
Okay, the Great Depression affected the working community. Well, but that is the issue there was not a conflict as regards borders, but because Germany had came behind the pain of reparation. That's why they invaded, and that's why eventually the Tottenham was implemented. But remember that when there were conflicts between countries, an important country was in part of the conflict in the league.
And that was the case of the material crisis and
For
the
example,
Syrian crisis.
the US, this is what she said, the USA was not part. And remember, disarmament eventually. Yes. The aim of disarmament was very good. So very fragile and eventually. Let's see this one. What period for this?
The case of the 20th century
So the roaring 20s.
and the Great Depression, or the Wall Street crash.
Okay, let me say. So this is the interwar period. How do you know that this is the roaring 20s?
People dancing.
Okay.
They are enjoying that period.
There are people dancing, enjoying this period of time. What music do you think they're dancing? Jazz, beat, and also the woman. So you know this belongs to the 20s. She's the flapper. Very good. Her hair, the dress, yes, the jewelry. She's dancing. Yes. This relates to the 20s. What do you remember about the 20s?
Period of booming,
A period of booms,
economic opportunity.
economic prosperity, opportunity. It's hard because if you look, who are depicted here?
White Americans.
Okay, so the 20s roar for everybody?
No.
No. Who suffered?
African Americans.
African Americans, Native Americans, immigrants, farmers, women, some women. So the 20s did not roar for everybody. Okay? But it was a period of great economic prosperity in the United States. All the country, yes, a period of booms. And this prosperity was mainly enjoyed by the white graph. Okay? And then what do you see here? This is the price of the share. Look, the price of the share going up. Then they stay and they abruptly. So when the price fell abruptly, what happens here?
Goes to crash.
There was
Okay.
what can you tell me about the Wall Street crash? Or it was as a consequence of the Wall Street crash, what happened?
The Great Depression started.
The Great Depression. So maybe it's the dividing line between the period of booms, yes, and the beginnings of the so we associate the decade with the Great Depression. It's the 30s.
1930s.
Yes, the 30s would be the period of harsh unemployment, economic problem in the USA and all around the world, and just in the States. What? It depends on what is short. Who was the president?
Franklin B.
No, the one who proposed the New Deal, Roosevelt. Yes. Roosevelt was the president. And then, was he successful in putting an end to all programs?
No. There was one good picture in workshop class. Statistics was
Showing what? Do you remember?
Unemployment.
Unemployment. Because unemployment was one of the issues. What happened to unemployment as a consequence of the New Deal? Increase. Did it increase or decrease? Increase. Because the New Deal is good, but
as dramatically as when the war started. After the war started, that's when unemployment went down.
put to work in this industry. Very good. So it contributed because unemployment increased, but it reached the same level of unemployment previously or pre-crisis. Yes, but it's not that easy anymore. The emergence of the social sector. Yeah, in that part. Yes, very good here. Let's see the following. This one. America is to blame for the Cold War because of their use of the atomic bomb. Truman decided to drop the bomb as a means to intimidate the Soviets. Dropping of the atomic bomb was not important as the last victory campaign of World War II, but as the first diplomatic move by the U.S. So what is this all about? The Cold War, and what is the meaning of this war? Okay, so America is to blame for the Cold War. Yes, and what caused this situation here? The use of the atomic bomb. Yes, yes.
By the time that the United States dropped the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, World War II was already basically come to an end. It was already finished, and it was seen worldwide as an unnecessary showcase of violence and power. And then the large race reached its highest point.
Potsdam. And if you see here it says Hiroshima and Potsdam. What do you remember about Potsdam? It was a conference, the leaders met, so you have Stalin, you have Truman, and what do you this year when Truman tells the USSR that they have a bomb. Yes. You have to bear in mind that, as we said, the war was beginning. Yes. And when they met in Potsdam, they were planning how the world would be organized at the end of the war. Yes, that was the plan. Remember that before, the USSR had promised to support the USA in the war in the Pacific. Yes, but between one conference and the other, the United States developed the US. And in Potsdam, Truman,
sé lo que
there
ha
was
sido.
a change of president. At Potsdam, Truman
No,
decided
no
to
está.
tell Stalin to become
De hecho, no hay tal F. Soy yo la única F que hay.
So in this way, he was intimidating the Soviet Union, marking this tension that characterized the Cold War and the beginnings of this arms race that we mentioned in week. And this is very important because
No, yo busqué con la palabra milena.
the USSR dropping
Sí, no aprobó. No aprobó, tiene el escrito.
Okay, so then the division of the
Sí, en el
area
escrito.
well,
Está en el 49.
there. Yes, this territory is controlled by the USA. So this is the position of Europe. It says, well,
Porque es de la comisión.
many say that it was used to put an end to the war in the Pacific, so Japan surrendered. Yes, but actually many say, well, yes, but this was
Ah, mira, la
show
Martí no aprobó.
power. The USSR marking making it the first move to this whole
Lo que te está lo mismo, tampoco.
Besides, Truman upheld anti-communist
Okay.
ideas, so his position
No hay tampoco.
regarding that
Delante de
idea
ella.
somehow
Cultura,
dispatched that study.
Very good. He didn't
Ah.
like
He didn't like
communism. Yes. Very
La
good.
mayoría
So this is the way.
yo tampoco.
Very good. That map
No, como
is
ella tampoco.
but it says the British Empire and in 19.
Mani.
How do you know that it is the fall? This is your knowledge.
This is the widest extent, the fullest extent nowadays, the British Empire.
Eso
Okay, very good. So it shows the empire at its widest extent. And all the territories are in red. But you know that not all the territories have the same relationship to the mother country. What do you remember? The colored empire and the white empire. Some were dominions. What does it mean? They had self-government. And what about the internal? And what about the colony? Copy and subject. Color empire. So you know that. Red, but it's not present here. Okay? Then what happened to the dominions eventually? They were anti-communist. But with the Statute of Westminster. Balfour. The Balfour Declaration and the Statute of Westminster, they were given independence, marking the beginnings of what organization? The British Commonwealth. Okay, so now you have the British Commonwealth independent in some territories, but the others are colonies. When do we see the beginnings of the end of this colored empire? Okay, when India gained independence, people, and what do you remember of the London Declaration? Yes.
Back in 1949.
Yes, why? Because what was the relationship between the previous dominions, now we're independent, and the mother country, or England, or the monarch? For example, Canada, Australia. No, once they get their independence, after the Statute of Westminster, what about the relationship with the monarch? They owed allegiance to the king. They were independent, but they acknowledged the monarch as the head of state. And that's why today Canada is a constitutional monarchy. Very good. India didn't want to acknowledge the authority of the king as head of state. Wanted to become a republic. So India became a republic, but wanted to be part of the Commonwealth, but you couldn't because you didn't recognize the king. And that's why the London Declaration. Yes, and what did the London Declaration state? India is that India, as any country, any independent country, free independent country, could join the Commonwealth. Yes, would they have to acknowledge the king as head of state? No. No. But what position was created in the Commonwealth? The head of the Commonwealth. That happens to be the king, but could be any other person. Well, when the queen died, just be replaced and somebody else, but they chose. Okay, but that is the idea. It's not the head of state, it's country. They acknowledge as head of the state, and they started London Declaration. So any country that is independent can join, whether they used to be part of the empire or not. Okay? That is the idea. Very good. And this one? How do you know that it's right? Okay, you have Great Britain dining alone, giving its back to the European Union. Okay? So So what is the position of the cartoonist? What do you think?
The cartoonist is expressing how England is turning its back to the rest of the European Union by leaving the European Union. Brexit may not be the smartest move. It is living by itself, and the rest are sharing a big table with benefits.
Okay, so here the cartoonist is criticizing, yes, the European Union and giving it back. Yes, what you say, your partner. Yes. Now, to what extent do you think has Brexit benefited the UK? What arguments could you give me? What it has benefited? Why?
Mainly for the control of
Okay, they had acquired this control of the borders that they wanted. Very good. And that's it, the only idea. Okay, I think what the difference is necessary because they were isolated. It's not that they were in the state. Yes, but you have the free movement of people. And that is what they want. Yes.
What do you need?
But if you start centering the European countries from people from Eastern Europe, yes, they want to benefit. And it hasn't benefited. Okay, so trade is an issue as you say now. Very good, they have to pay for speed.
Let's talk about race, for example. Recent nationalist feelings, xenophobic.
Excellent, very good. Or strong, so maybe they never disappear. It's actually one of the causes of the Brexit is related to nationalism.
Britain generally opposed to the free movement of people.
Of people different from what?
Themselves.
Yes. Very good. And the last one, this one. Clear. A new Labour Party. Very good. What do you remember about the old Labour or the new Labour? Well, when Tony Blair became the leader of the Labour Party before the election, before becoming Prime Minister, he wanted to introduce changes to the Labour Party because the Labour Party had lost support. Remember, this is the 90s, so socialists had lost the whole war.
Yes.
Yes. They were losing support and they wanted to introduce, they wanted to modernize the party. So this clause 4, this socialist element was changed, yes, and was made the ideas were expressed in a vague way, maybe to avoid this socialist element, and the idea was also to attract people from other parts of society, not just the workers, yes, but they wanted to have the support of more people from different solutions in our country. And actually this was quite successful because eventually he won the election and then he won again and then he won again. Yes, showing the support of people what the triumph changes that he had introduced. That's why he wins by the last. Okay? That is the after that. This one, you can have 100% security, have 100% privacy, and it's Barack Obama.
That is one of the aftermaths about the war on terror after the Patriot Act was passed back in 2001 and the subsequent amendments that were done. Eventually, the replacement of the Patriot Act bill because of the different perspective that President Obama, the Obama doctrine, or slap bill off, according to some authors, compared to the Bush doctrine.
Okay, wait. Because remember that the doctrine is internal panorama.
Freedom Act.
No, because that is later on.
This
That's
is-
related to what she said.
Yes.
So after the 9/11 attack, remember the war on terror began. Internationally, it was expressed with these interventions, and internally with the passing of the Patriot Act. That at the very beginning, it had its great support on the part of the people. Yes, scrutiny, because the aim was to prevent another act of terrorism. So they realized that they could come from within the country. Yes, so they were searching for the terrorist within the country. And they used this fear factor, and people supported them. But eventually they realized that this Patriot Act went in.
The amendments of the amendments.
Yes. Right.
Yo te decía,
Okay?
pero-
So this measure began to be questioned by people. But the thing is that the Patriot Act has different sunset dates. It has to be renewed. Yes, and 2013 is related to one of the sunset dates. And Obama wanted to
Sí, está el teléfono bien.
renew the Patriot Act. And this is the
Está bien.
explanation that you can't have
Yo de exploración televisión salsa.
100% privacy and zero security. He said, if you have 100% security, you gotta have 100% privacy. You need to do some searches, to investigate. Now, if you want 100% privacy, well, you won't have 100% security. In that case, you can't have 100% in gold. You need some sort of inconvenience to compromise. Okay? You need to compromise. What are you willing to compromise? Yes. What do you prefer? 100% privacy or 100% security? That is the idea. Yes. And if you want that security, well, some privacy. That is the idea. Okay? Eventually, it was replaced by the Freedom Act. Very good. And this one? This is 2024. There were some amendments so as not, yes, it prevented the collection of the bulk information.
Like a restatement of the Patriot Act
Act,
without that part.
but without some parts. And today, there is the new reauthorization of the Freedom Act with some more changes. Yes, so as to dilute this scrutiny element that was very much criticized. That is the, that's why it is a new act, so they have to introduce changes for people to approve. Yes, and this one? Who can you see? Trump or Kamala Harris? Okay.
We have the lights. We can-
Ah,
Yes.
sorry, I no. And the light goes from here.
Someone is trying this.
So here you see, this is Trump. Yes, in a broom, like a witch. It's portrayed like a witch, but here is the cat, sort of witch. Yes. It says GOP. That is a reference to the Republican Party. And then here you see fire, and the flag is upside down. And then here, and you see clouds, darkness, storm, lightning around Trump. And here you have Kamala, and a donkey representing the Democratic Party, and she has the torch. See? Yes. And she is white. It is green, so, what do you think?
Oh, the cartoon.
Yeah, this is related to the race towards the presidential election. Okay, and what is the position of the cartoonist? Okay, it's against Trump because what happened? So this is the race. Yes, the race towards the presidential election. Who is winning according to the cartoon? Trump seems to be winning. Okay, in this race, and eventually he won. But he's showing you what will happen if Trump wins. What will happen?
Something bad.
Something bad.
And the country will be backwards. Just upside down.
Of course, that is usually a sign of protest or that something is working well. Chaos, turmoil, violence, yes. That will happen if Trump wins. Whereas Kamala is presented as the defender of democracy. Okay, read. Very good. Very good. Very good. Because it's yeah. Yes, and we see here, I don't know this, but
Yeah, it's like the questionable.
no. Oh, it's a, oh, it says, not the line. The line, or for the or because it's a social media. Okay. Okay, for him, his personal interests are more important than party interests. Though he's the representative of the party. Okay? Very good. And now you are going to work then. We are going to analyze some sources. So you will have access sources to participant questions. This is very similar to what will happen in partial, so, analyze the source and take notes in a key chart to answer the question. And in groups, plan a 3-minute answer that includes the analysis of the source. Imagine that this is your exam. You have to plan the answer and include the source in your answer. Would you answer? Okay, so I give you 10 minutes, 15. This first, you will work with the first question, the relation to globalization. You will work with the second question, is related to Ireland. The third question here, the work related to Canada. And the last question
Bueno, Ireland no tengo idea. Globalization todavía no vi.
Pero Globalization es lo único que me puedo llegar a acordar un mínimo.
Ay, no, o sea, de esto no puedo contar nada en este instante.
No, mira, yo tampoco.
¿Qué es esto? ¿Un meme, boludo?
¿De qué es el meme?
Ese. Finally examined.
A ver, ¿qué la abrís vos? ¿Vos tenés Google Slides? Porque a mí no se me ven con Google Drive. Ah, es por eso.
Sí, yo también salgo.
Yo lo borré. Digo, ¿para qué lo que necesito?
Yo por ahí porque como tengo las presentaciones.
terminologies needed to discuss new conditions. The current proliferation of global thought also seems unlikely to be accidental. The popularity of the terminology, globalization, arguably reflects a widespread intuition that contemporary social relations have acquired an important new character. The challenge, indeed, the urgent need, is to move beyond the buzzword to the heart. Okay, so that group. Who wants to give their speech? Their 3-minute speech. Well, pero entienden las notas. You can read what you wrote. Who feels confident to develop an oral response? Give an oral response. Nobody? No? Well, lo que dure is 3 minutes. Let's start with your position. How would you start? How would you start your answer? Defining globalization. Remember, follow the same order as if it was an essay. So you need to give a contextualization. That the best thing to do in a contextualization is to define globalization, define racism, define regionalism, define education, equity, multiculturalism. So, you pot is very important. So here, define globalization, for example. Then you need to present, well, the issue at stake. Yes, there is a debate. Well, no, some people, or it is true that globalization, however, your grade is there. Yes? and then your position, your stance with the arguments you're going to do. And then, when you depending on where you put the source, it is part of your arguments. When you develop your arguments, you include the source. Okay? You can include it depending on the time and how you organize your answer. If you don't agree with the source, you can include it in your concession. This is for the oral, for the written. You have some freedom in the oral, but you don't have the written. Maybe when you give the opposing view, say some authors like Schulte in this source, you give this. However, yes. So you make sure that you analyze the source, and then if you have more time, once you finish your argument, you can come back to the concession and finish developing the concession. But you make sure that you have analyzed the source. Yes? In the oral. In the oral. This is the oral. Okay? In the written, you know. Okay? So, do you want to start? No? No? Anybody? No? Of this question?
Yes, because I did it yesterday.
Ah!
I thought about it also when studying globalization.
Okay, so if you feel
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure, but
yes,
I
you
can
can.
try.
So, and let's see if the arguments that she gives relate to one included in your picture. Come on.
Well, I defined first globalization as Schulte does. So he defines globalization as the spread of transplanetary connections between people. And from this perspective of supraterritoriality, globalization involves reduction in barriers to trans-world social contacts. Then, even though Schulte and Friedman propose different eras of or periods of globalization, implying that it is not a new phenomenon, it can be said that globalization is a new phenomenon to a great extent because of the idea of supraterritoriality proposed by Schulte and the idea that the world is flatter than ever, according to Friedman. And then I developed both arguments.
So, in 40 seconds, she gave the introduction. Okay? Very good. And pay attention here. In the case of globalization, you can choose. If you have a general definition of globalization for your contextualization, that can apply to globalization being new or not. But in her case, that she says that globalization is a new phenomenon to a great extent, the definition can be supraterritoriality or the flattening of the world. But you cannot define globalization as supraterritoriality and then say it is not a new phenomenon. When the spread of supraterritoriality is that it's new. So pay attention that you don't contradict, yes, with your idea.
Friedman said that the word is flatter than ever. He proposes the different. He said that globalization on all three.
Well, but he said the world today is flat. When do we see the flattening of the world? When did the world become flat? In the third period of globalization, we control in the year 2000 as a consequence of technology, developments in technology. So she said, even though, and this one is something I didn't mention, but look, focus on Schulte's and Friedman's definition. That is why she's making reference to Schulte and Friedman. Even though Schulte and Friedman acknowledge that there are other eras of globalization, that there are antecedents, or that the process started. The process had started before contemporary globalization. Yes, it's a new phenomenon to a great extent because of the spread of supraterritoriality and the flattening of the world. Okay, that is the idea. Both Schulte and Friedman mention previous eras of globalization, but they say the globalization that we are living today is cannot be compared to anything that happens in the past. Yes.
So we don't have to be considered on the one side or the other.
Yes, because she said it's new to a great extent. We are taking it back.
I read short side or frequent side.
But they both believe that it's they both believe that there are different stages in globalization, and both define globalizations differently. Scholz, supraterritoriality, and Friedman as flattening of the world. When do they see supraterritoriality and the flattening of the world? In the third stage,
according to them.
according to them. So even though they acknowledge there are previous eras, what they understand globalization is what is happening now in the third stage. So in that sense, they coincide, they agree. Yes? So you can take any of these views. Your concession, yes.
No, that if we want to say that it is to a small extent, we should talk about the different eras.
Yes.
And for the counter argument, we should say that even though they think that the third era is a
The
new
other way
insight,
around, in the concession would be, even though they believe that the spread of supraterritorial relations and the flattening of the world are characteristics of today or the contemporary world, globalization started, or is not a new phenomenon to a great extent because there are eras, previous eras, and you mentioned then with Friedman, the era of Friedman, with Scholz.
okay,
It's the same?
yeah, the other way around.
Yes.
Yes.
The thing is that if you read the source, where would you read the source? It's a new phenomenon for Scholz.
Yes.
Yes, and he speaks about, he speaks the contemporary social relations have acquired an important new character. What is that new character? Okay? No, because maybe you don't agree. You have to focus on the things that you don't support. The other way. Well, but you support it's not a new because you have to focus on their positions because they say you don't go. But he stays,
But the thing is that the source, I would have to put it on the.
well, you don't have to mention it, even though Scholz mentioned that there are views that social relations have acquired a new character for me. Globalization is different. But because you don't understand globalization as a culture, yeah, how do you define globalization? Okay, so you need to give it a more general definition of globalization and not word connection. Something like that. Yes, so you understand globalization as transword connection, but she defined globalization as supraterritoriality. You define it as supraterritoriality, and you define it in a more general way, but you can
There's a new concept that
okay.
maybe we should
So
say that globalization is old, but it's new concept, maybe superterritoriality is what is
Very good. The new characteristic of territorial is new, but globalization as such is not. Okay?
Of course, we understood of new words for new
For this. Okay? And when you develop them, you can also come back to the source. Even though you don't agree with the source, you say, well, and I believe this, even though the author mentions it, I believe this. So you can like, refute the source in the order. Okay? Let's see the following one. Ireland. To what extent did the independence of Ireland mean the end of conflicts on the island of Ireland?
I had a question with the contextualization with what you said. There's two ways to go. I feel
Sí.
because Ireland was, it became a republic, independent republic in 1949. But the Government of Ireland Act, it ended the war with
Partition.
Yeah, the partition was in 1920. So I didn't know which one to say.
Independence here would be when it became a republic, but in the contextualization you can mention the idea of the partition because this Between
Northern Ireland.
no, because it's about here. The conceptualization would be about the island part.
Ireland is entire.
Yes.
It's entire, so to speak.
And you're going to refer about the two communities living, the two conflicts. Yes, and eventually resulted in the partition. Yes, and eventually the yes, because it's the independence department for the island department. So because here the question is not about Northern Ireland, but it's about the problems that led to the partition, the division and partition and independence department.
Yes, but there was conflict between Northern Ireland
And then to say that independence put the end to those conflicts that existed.
Besides, you both says we're finally independent, aren't you? Aren't you going to join us, Northern Ireland? Northern Ireland? No, I don't think I
No, I
will.
don't.
No, I don't think I will.
So we are finally independent and you're going to join us? I don't think so.
I have a question.
So, who is this man or who does he represent?
Northern Ireland.
Like who specifically? Northern Ireland.
The
Saying no, I don't think we want to join
the
you.
protest.
The Protestant, the Unionists. Remember that when Ireland gained independence, who were a majority in Northern Ireland?
Unionists.
The Unionists. Who governed the North?
Unions.
The Unionists. They were the ones who were ruling, the ruling group. Yes, because of all these gerrymandering and yes, the difficulty for Catholics.
Talk about separation in Northern Ireland. I feel like that's because to what extent has regionalism that is separation in Northern Ireland?
That is Northern Ireland.
Yes, so that would be to what extent because they don't want to separate from the UK.
No,
does it
the
depend?
Unionists,
Yes,
but the Nationalists,
but there's two ways of
yes.
responding that question.
And it
Because
depends
they
on-
want to separate from the rest of Ireland, but they want to unionize with UK. But then the Republic of Ireland, they want to separate from the UK.
Sorry? I don't understand.
Digamos, vos tenés Northern Ireland y el resto de Irlanda. El sentimiento de que el regionalismo lleve al derecho de separatismo, como que eso
Separate from the UK.
Claro, pero el norte no se quiere separar de UK. O lo
¿Quién no se quiere separar?
Los protestantes.
But there is a community that is Republican.
Pero a día de hoy ellos siguen con UK.
But what are their aims?
Pero o sea, no es como que se pueda decir que ellos no son separatistas porque justamente quieren quedarse con UK. O sea, como que yo lo veo desde el punto de que quieren separarse de Irlanda o desde el punto de que quieren unirse con Gran Bretaña.
But they
Northern
are
Ireland.
Northern Ireland is part of the UK.
Ok, entonces sí
So
sería
separatism is separate from the UK.
Ok,
Yes.
no sería como separate entre Irlanda, digamos.
Separatism in Northern Ireland is separate from the UK.
Claro.
The political unity. Okay, so here contextualization is about partition and then independence. Now, to what extent did the independence of Ireland mean the end of the conflict in the Irish department? To a small extent. Do you have a speech or argument?
I started regarding between religious conflict and political conflict, but then we also have the struggle with
Okay, well, what argument would you give? Yes.
I didn't develop the arguments, but I have the Irish Civil War that happened after because of all these tensions that remained after the War of Independence.
But that would be part of the contextualization. The Irish Civil War of Independence, partition, independence, all that could be included in your contextualization. Because the question is, that independence of Ireland, did that independence, Ireland separated, finally put an end to the conflict? Did the creation of the Irish Free State and then the creation of the Republic of Ireland put an end to the conflict on the island of Ireland? You say, even though it is true that in the Republic
today. You cannot start it for that.
So you can refer to the trouble, this great period of violence, so showing that the independence did not put an end on the island because actually conflicts continued in the north. Violence erupted in the north, this period called the troubles, and you can mention examples of the conflicts in the trouble. Violence, violence, what examples can you give of the violence? Why? What religion? Well, but in your contextualization, you're going to start referring to the nationalists, unionists, and the conflict between nationalists and unionists continued in the north. They were solved in the south. I would mention that in the well,
What you use in the arguments was to say that tensions and conflicts continue. You have two groups, some people that want different things and that have different religions.
they are according to the according to plan.
I can talk about the religion that later on led to several other
Okay, so that is the violence. The conflict continued because of the outbreak of violence, and you can explain why there was violence. Yes? So one of the points would be violence, the trouble, problem, conflict continued. Another argument?
No, no.
After
The fact that
partition
many agreements
and
had to be
independence.
passed in order to settle
You say could be, okay, could be. And apart from that, what did the Republic of Ireland want? Or what did the Republic of Ireland, when it was created, yes, and with its constitution of 1937, what did it state in relation to the North that was changed then with the Good Friday Agreement? The North. Okay, Article 2 of the Constitution of Ireland said that Ireland, I will read the article for you. The national territory consists of the whole island of Ireland. That is what the Constitution of Ireland used to say. So you see that even though the Republic of Ireland became independent, the Republic of Ireland never accepted partition, and we see that this conflict over the status of the North continued, and the South continued claiming the North as part of their territory. That was solved in a way with the Good Friday Agreement when the Constitution had to be amended, yes, modified, and then with this principle of consent. Yes, but that was solved in the Good Friday Agreement. So that is another issue. The conflict over the status of the North was not solved. The South still claims the North part. That could be another. Yes. Yes. Because of the IRA, because they yes. Okay?
Quite tricky.
Yes, you can, it's an oral, so we can help you, but you can also give more examples that show that the conflict continues today. She said the fact that so many agreements had to be reached to put an end to the problem shows that the conflict continues. The fact that the assembly, or that the power share, the assembly collapsed several times and the power sharing was restored last year shows that conflict continues. The fact that walls are still present shows that there is tension and they should continue. So you have many arguments and examples to give us to show that conflict continues. And then you have arguments to say, well, no, they have been solved because there is power sharing in defense. Yes,
Can I mention constitutional ambiguity as regards
constructive ambiguity.
yeah, I agree because there's power sharing, but it's very vague which one of the two these people that go together prevails.
No, the debate, the one that has the majority, yes, so then they have the same power. Yes. The constructive ambiguity is what allowed the Good Friday Agreement to stand. Yes, that is more related maybe not to this question, but related to the Good Friday.
One of the arguments that, if edited conflicts, there weren't just one time because of the historical differences in politics.
What is tension? This is what the context of this tension, why tension continued or conflict continued because of these differences, political and religious differences.
Would that be a separate argument, or would it be inside the trouble? Because that's what.
The thing is that the troubles is an example
Okay.
of the conflicts.
Okay.
Yes? Or these conflicts, these tensions that you mentioned resulted or led to the trouble, to this period by the okay?
Can we also mention for example, the lack of recognition of the Irish culture in the north? For example, they didn't teach the language at state school.
Okay, the lack of
history.
rights.
Yes.
Yes. And that they demanded then, and that's why we were there were issues of power sharing, and yeah, or they were deprived of their rights, that's why the civil rights movement started in the north. Very good. Let's see the following. To what extent has multiculturalism benefited Franco-Canadians? So this reference. Come on. We need to write the stating waiting here.
No. Katie, what is Katie?
Come on.
There you go.
How do you start your answer? Okay, by defining multiculturalism and as a policy approach. So you should say when multiculturalism is in Canada. 71 and then 88. Multiculturalism. So you define multiculturalism and you have to say in Canada when. Yes, that's context. And then, what is your position?
Well, we started thinking about, when we first read the question, we thought to a little extent. And then finding, crossing the arguments, we eventually found arguments that were very extent. Basically,
So let's see the concessions.
yes, that would be many Canadians in Quebec were against the policy of multiculturalism because it would be against their claim that they are a distinct society because they're one of the two only people of the country. Three only people of the country, and they favor interculturalism.
Well, there you have two arguments.
Yes, in society.
And interculturalism.
Which is that basically interculturalism establishes the recognition and respect of other cultures without declining
Equality, but the Canadian culture in Quebec.
Yes.
In the province of Quebec. Interculturalism equality, maybe that is promoted in Quebec, not in Canada. Okay? So it's related to Quebec. So, to what extent has multiculturalism benefited Franco-Canadians? So, it hasn't benefited Franco-Canadians because it goes against its claims of being a distinct society. Yes, when multiculturalism, remember, treats all cultures equally, and they believe that they are not equal to other ethnic minorities living in Canada. They are a distinct society because they are one of the founding peoples of the nation. Okay, so multiculturalism goes against those.
Can we say that an example of multiculturalism could be the claim we have?
Wait, but that is the other position. Because we are it has benefited to a small extent. Sorry, to a small extent because it started with that. To a small extent. So it goes against their claims and they don't favor multiculturalism in Quebec from Canadians because they favor this interculturalism.
Maybe there we are actually the 101.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're the like
And then, they have benefited to a great extent. Okay, so one of the arguments is that the policy of multiculturalism puts an end to the policy of assimilation that was the policy of Canada until this policy was implemented. And this is very important because now this meant that now multiculturalism is the policy and not assimilation. What does that mean for Canadians? Okay, that their culture will be enhanced, promoted, respected, and they won't try to be assimilated into the Anglophone English mainstream. So this is important. Recognition of their culture, yes, and not assimilation to the English culture. Very good.
And we also thought about French Canadians outside Quebec.
Okay, French Canadians outside Quebec.
They were more protected after the multiculturalism because they were quite a minority outside Quebec.
Very good. How are they protected? For example,
They had their French was the official language, so they had all the public documents written both in English and French, and they could choose.
very good. So the Franco-Canadians outside Quebec, because in Quebec they are a majority, you mentioned that French is the official language. Outside Quebec, where they are a minority, they have benefited, for example, with the language. Yes, with
That's only on the legal field or in education also?
in public services at federal level.
Okay. So if we had a doubt there, because the official language act, the first one, is before the policy of multiculturalism.
Yes, but it's in the context.
Okay. So we can
Yes,
use it.
because remember that there is an incipient stage. What is the stages? The incipient stage is after the war, when Canadians begin to realize the importance of official language.
Yes.
So in that context, and actually that is that, we could say that multiculturalism was a way to answer, yes, to this Quebecois nationalism. At that time, that was the way the government found to give an answer to Quebecois nationalism. Then they continued demanding more.
69, por eso se quejan porque dice que official language act was passed both English and French, but in Canada's official languages, o sea, en todo el país no puede.
To what extent is
Gracias.
Great Britain measured in the second half of the 20th century promote race relations? Okay, you can define race relations. You can define race relations, or you can refer to race relations issues in the UK, the context after the British
I have
Nationality
a
Act.
question with that because when do we see because the British Nationality Act, for example, was passed in 1948.
Yes.
Considered already
We can consider it part because it's after the war, but actually, that promote race relations? No. No. Actually, as a consequence of that, yes, if you see the impact of the act, it's the same as with the official language act. When it's in the context, sometimes it's very difficult to find it, particularly sometimes an act passed in 1 year, but the impact, the influence, was more significant.
There are many regulations that go outside. And they complement each
But this
other
one
because
is
the
with
first
the
one.
Okay,
So
immigration policy.
yeah.
Let's see this group. What do you have? Let's see. To what extent the regions they promoted race relations to a great extent. What arguments can you give? They promoted race relations.
There are many regulations that complement each other.
And what is the aim of the race relations?
To end discrimination.
And discrimination.
Okay.
So the first one is the first one to try to abolish discrimination, but it's incomplete because it will not take into account housing and employment, but then the second one takes into account housing and employment, so on and so forth.
Okay.
Then the second race relations act.
The third one.
The third one.
Yes. Because it has 65
And then the
regulations.
regulation amendment,
When?
In 2000. That's the beginning of the
Look at the
first sentence.
In an oral exam, you can mention, but remember, check the
Yeah, that's
because you have 2000, you have an Yes, because measures were passed to end discrimination, to integrate the immigrants living in the country. We give the examples of the Race Relations Act. Any other arguments?
But the immigration act were also passed at the same time, but more or less at the same time. You have the
Well, but that would be part of a great extent or
not like one.
and then to a small extent, yes, they did not promote the race relations. Why?
Because the immigration were passed through. Because immigration acts were passed through.
And what was the aim of immigration acts?
To
Discriminate. So actually the first response of the government to the issue, yes, to the conflict created in the country was to limit. Yes, the first thing they thought was this.
And even the Labour Party promoted.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and it depends on how you explain that. Good say. They didn't promote race relations because actually they limited the entrance of people. They limited the number of people who could enter in connection with different immigration acts that show that limit, that in a way by limiting your rights, you're not promoting race relations. Yes. So you decide, because the immigration acts are, when you pass an immigration act, you are deciding who can enter and who cannot depending on their skin color. You're deciding when you're
They do not promote immigration. So this could be the antecedent of race.
Okay, so one argument. Another argument?
There was a limit, the amount of the immigrants were able to give more benefits or to help more the bigger the
Very good. So you can refer to the Labour Party policy here if you wish. And this dual approach that they say, well, there is a need to limit in order to be able to integrate the ones already living in the country. So you can explain that they complement taking the position of the Labour Party that in 1968 they passed an immigration act and the Race Relations Act. Yes, that's a year. Trying to show that. And then here you can mention it was on the conservative. If you take that position, here you mention it was taught by the Conservative Party. Yes, and you explained this twin-track approach of the Labour Party here, showing that, well, they want you to promote race relations by restricting the number in order to integrate the ones already living in the country. Okay? That's why how you explain will take an example from one side to the other. And the source? Look, demonstrations against Asian immigration in London.
So, the discrimination or exclusion was not only legally but also socially because of racial attitudes of the society at that time.
Okay. So maybe you had a law, you have Race Relations Act, but it was very difficult to change people's attitudes and racism continued, racist attacks continued, conflicts continued.
The immigration act of 1971 was passed. It was the one that favored those who have an UK ancestry to enter the country. If you don't have that, it was very difficult to enter.
Yes, but if you see, similar to what happened in the United States, even though you have legislation, yes, that outlaws discrimination, they continue to be racist. So you have the theory of the practice. So even though regulations that were passed, yes, discrimination continues. You mentioned society. Very difficult to change. Yes. And even today, you see the practice. The thing is that this is the second half of the 20th, so you cannot have up until today. Yes? Very good, people. So, let's have the break. And when we go back, let's get
Included in the partial, but it's included in the final exam. And you should prepare the folder like last year in Cultura 1. Do you remember? Good. So, in relation to architecture, you will see different buildings, okay, in this case, that show the evolution of the formation of the skyscrapers, especially in the United States, in New York, okay? The first three, I don't know if you can see very well. The first three refer to the modern period. And the fourth one includes the World Trade Yes? And the important thing is that you have to be able to describe the characteristics of the modern architecture and the characteristics of postmodern architecture, especially skyscrapers. Okay? And then, well, the last one refers to Cesar Pelli in Argentina, Banco Macro. Okay? And the fact that he's an intercultural architect. Okay? So, characteristics of modernity, and that it's more complex, that includes the strategy of intertextuality, yes, incorporating elements of different traditions, yes, that we call narrativity, yes, and then the study of Cesar Pelli as an intercultural architect, okay? Good. And then in painting, you have to study different styles, okay? These are paintings produced in the 20th century in Canada, in Great Britain, and in the USA, okay? The first one is an example of the group of 7 in Canada, yes? That they explore and show a distinct Canadian identity, yes? And then, well, to explain the characteristics. The second one is related to what style? You know? No idea? General knowledge of the word? Vorticism. Vorticism. In Great Britain. Vorticism. Yes, the British avant-garde movement that flourished, yes, at the beginning of the 20th century. Okay? Then we have pension. Yes, and the social realism. Okay. Pension. Then this one, from general knowledge of the word, what would you say? ¿Cómo le decimos en español ese estilo? Abstracto. So, abstract expressionism. Abstract expressionism. Okay. Good. With Jackson Pollock. Was a main painter, Jackson Pollock, that started the 50s, okay? Yes. And then finally,
Y después empieza a meterse.
pop art. Who was the main painter? Andy Warhol, with pop art style also in the United States. So if you go, for example, to New York, there is a museum.
Aparece.
Chequear que haya colectivos que pasan cosas.
That one? Yes, that one. The MoMA, that one. I went there and you have the one of the gallery of Andy Warhol. Yes, you have it there. You can see different paintings of Andy Warhol. And in the presentation, please go over the presentation. And in the presentation, you have sometimes questions in relation to what extent
¿Lo tienes que pagar?
can you then show or can you relate them to the context in which they were produced. For example, social realism, art, yes. The context, the situation, the historical context in which they were produced, because they also show or reflect something of society. Okay? So pay attention to that. Yes?
20th century.
20th century.
As a whole, or
well, Vorticism flourished at the beginning of the 20th century. So something in relation to the end of the 19th, the beginning of the 20th. Okay? And then the other ones, the 20th. Good. Very good. And in relation to education, that now Katie will talk about education in the United States. We have seen education in Great Britain. We had a face-to-face one. And then there was a virtual week, and you have to study education in the USA. Yes? Very few people did the exit tickets. Yes? And there were no questions on the exit tickets. But I just want to point out that you have to compel or education infrastructure masters and the democratization of education. And also in the USA, the developments of racism and education. Okay, that was also very important. In the USA, you have different development in relation to, for example, Black Americans and education. Okay, and also several in some of the periods, important people did things in education. Yes. For example, Horace Mann
and John Dewey.
John Dewey. During the period of the Harlem Renaissance.
Washington and Webster Walker.
Good, very good. And then later on we have Lyndon Johnson. Yes, then Bush, then Obama. Okay, good, very good.
Profe,
Yes.
I have a question. I think it may be a silly question, but the ideas of we must compel our masters to learn their letters and we must educate our masters. Are they the same?
Yes, it's the same.
Oh, okay.
It's the same. Sometimes it's the way that you find the quote, because the quote is longer, but sometimes if you read that source in some papers or in the internet, then it was like reduced. Okay, but it was the same one that sometimes is you found it longer and sometimes you find it more abbreviated.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. And now, Katie will talk about education in the USA in the 21st century. Okay? So it complements what you have seen in the presentation. Okay?
All right. So, as we said, I'm going to be giving a presentation about the U.S. education system in the 21st century, more specifically looking at inequity within the education system. All right, so just to do my interview as always, my overview, not the interview. I'm going to start with a breakdown of the education system, just that when I throw these terms out, like higher education, you know exactly what I'm speaking about. Then I'm going to take a look at the modern educational segregation that is happening today, has been persistent across history, both across race and across class. We're going to take a look at funding and resource gaps within certain school districts that are more privileged and others that are underprivileged, and the students that actually make up these school districts. We're going to talk about the consequences of this inequity, of this gap in funding and resources. And then, like always, we're going to have a little case study with President Trump because he always finds a way into my presentations one way or another. Yeah. So I actually just included this, but I realized you already had this image on your
presentation.
Yeah, so this was just to like make clear the ideas of equality versus equity, but you guys already all know that from the presentation, so I'll just do that. All right. So to go on to the brief overview. So in the U.S. we have preschool, younger, kindergarten through 5th grade. Middle school is 6th through 8th grade, which is kind of a weird. It's like the awkward period of your life put into school years. And then high school, which is 9th through 12th grade. So these are all.
Sorry, one thing. Don't worry if you want to, because sometimes you want to take pictures or you want to see. Don't worry, we will upload the presentation to the virtual platform. Okay? But give me time. Today, tomorrow, Monday.
Next Monday.
I always forget that tomorrow is a public holiday.
Yes, that's true.
So I have to change. Is there someone here who have registered for my tutoring session? No. I will change it for next week because I forgot that tomorrow is a public holiday. Okay? And I have my kids at home, so it will be impossible to have the tutoring session without my kids nearby. Sorry for the interruption. Now you can start again. It's just for them to know that we will upload the
100%. I think it's because it is a lot of information, so it's probably going to be overwhelming because I'm going to go through it. Okay, so in terms of high school, completing high school is actually not uniformly compulsory across the United States. There's actually different ages state by state. So for example, my state where I come from, Rhode Island, you actually do have to complete high school. You have to reach the age of 18 legally for your schooling. But other states like New York, for example, are 16. There are some states that are 14. So just to give you an idea of like what level of education is actually required. But you do need a high school diploma, which is represented by this blue rectangle right here, to access higher education institutions, or a GED, which is a test you could take instead of a high school diploma if you don't go to high school, to access community college, which is like a 2-year degree, or associate college, also 2-year degree, or a university or 4-year college, where you get a bachelor's degree. So that's usually the most, between university and community college, those are the most common options. From a university or a 4-year college, you can then get a master's degree, which is kind of equivalent to what you all graduate with here, with a career. It gives you an actual title and, you know, more specific technical knowledge to do something. And from there, you can continue on to get your doctorate or a PhD, and there's also different professional degrees you can get coming out of exactly law school, medical school. Okay, cool. So when we talk about higher education, you know that Alright, and then briefly, just to highlight some forms of alternative schooling in the U.S. that you might not be familiar with here in Argentina. Magnet schools are public schools that offer specialized curriculum, community science, community arts, community technology. Has anyone seen Victorious?
Yes.
So yeah, it's a good example. So that's like a performing arts school, but it really does encapsulate what a magnet school is. It's a public school, so they're receiving funding and it's free to go there, but the admissions are competitive, so you would have to audition. Sometimes there's a lottery until students get in. But basically it's a means of attracting a diverse group of students that might not be able to pay for this sort of private specialized education, and yeah, promote this like innovation and specialized sorts of talent. But I think the Victorious example is fine. And then homeschooling actually is legal in all 50 states of the U.S. So it was interesting for me to learn the adverse here in Argentina, which is not as legal, or there are a lot more restrictions. But there are regulations, like in some states, in my state, for example, I did know a few students that were homeschooled, and they would have to take the same standardized test as us. So like when I was taking my tests at school, they were just taking them at home, but this is to regulate the fact that parents are actually keeping their children on track with like the standards set by the state government. And yeah, something I thought interesting about homeschooling was that prior to COVID and like the remote learning that came from that, we had about 2.5 million students in the U.S. being homeschooled, but now, as of 2024, after the pandemic, this number is almost doubled to 4 million students. So it's a good chunk of the, yeah.
I think in the US you also have like virtual schools.
Yeah.
Does that compare to homeschooling?
That's a really great question. So she's asking about virtual schools, if anyone in the back could hear. So virtual schooling, for the most part, is more towards high school. So homeschooling would be younger, but there are options to take high school online. Sometimes like celebrities or people that have really like professional athletes, like maybe teenagers that are doing that, or like maybe even like influencers or people like that. They have the option to take online school in high school. There's also online university programs as well. You can pretty much do, like I have a friend that just got a master's completely taking online classes as well. So there's a lot of options, but I would say it's a little bit different. It's different from homeschool in the sense that it's not your parents teaching you that, or you're registered online. And
That's why I was asking if it would be inside of homeschool, because you're still at home.
I would say it's its own thing. Yeah. So it's its own sort of separate entity. But that's a great question.
That's what taught by a professional.
Exactly. You're taught by a professor.
But homeschooling you can also hire it too.
Yeah, but it's not so common.
No.
Homeschooling is more common than parents are in charge of education.
Because it's usually about, not usually about, but sometimes it's about the parents wanting to have this control over the material. I know it's being themselves rather than hire someone else. But yeah, like a lot of virtual school programs come from universities themselves. So you'd be learning from the same professor as someone actually attending that university in person. You're just taking it online.
That would be more distance education.
Distance,
Called
yeah.
distance education. And we have here now, here in Argentina, we have more when we make reference to postgraduate courses.
You have that big building with the UNC virtual learning. Is that?
Yes, no, but that is more administrative.
I've always seen that. I didn't know what that.
But here, for example, the School of Languages, postgraduate courses used to be in person, face to face, and now most of them are distance. Yes. Yes. And for example, I did my master's degree online, completely online. So they're here in Argentina. I think that they're more common when we make reference to master's degree or PhD degrees, okay, or postgraduate courses, or what we call diplomaturas, okay, that in high school.
Alright, so now turning to the many ways in which modern day education in the United States remains largely segregated. So despite the diversity we have in our education system, schools remain widely segregated both by race and class, and oftentimes these factors intersect. So certain school districts, we'll talk about in the statistics, remain very impoverished, and others have very abundant resources. And so this is related to historical zoning and residential segregation, where in certain communities it would make easier for them to move into nicer neighborhoods, where others were barred from access to nicer, more affluent neighborhoods. And I just want to think this to show that this is not something that's like even flatlining. This is something that's getting worse, even in recent days. So the study found that from 1991 to 2020, segregation between like white students and black students increased by 35%, and in the same period of time, economic segregation, so between classes, increased by 47% by the same. So it's actually worsening, and these trends between racial segregation and class segregation are overlapping. Alright, so this graph I think does a really good job of showing the disparities between different racial groups of students and the economic funding resource gaps. So this graph right here shows the percentage of public school students by different racial groups and the percentage of them that are in high poverty schools. So if you see this, Hispanic students 38% in high poverty schools. Black students 37% are in high poverty schools. White students 7% are in high poverty schools. And this is not at all obviously like relative to the overall population of these races in the United States. And just to make the measure by which we define high poverty clear, high poverty schools are considered schools where more than 75% of the student population is eligible for free school lunches, so government subsidized lunches. So, more on the funding and resource gaps between these schools that would be classified as high poverty and those as not high poverty or well off. Funding is largely tied to local property taxes. So schools that are in wealthier neighborhoods, which also tend to have more white residents, they're receiving more funding. Because of this, schools in poorer districts, they struggle with inadequate facilities, large class sizes. Oftentimes teachers don't want to go work there because the facilities are worse and the resources are worse. And oftentimes this also coincides with less advanced classes, less extracurriculars, in general just less opportunities within the schools. Yes. Another statistic that so to go alongside this, because we were just only speaking about public schools, I also want to talk about private schools. So the private schools is the same here for the ones that you're going to be paying for. So what this graph does is shows the over-representation of white students state with the amount of white students making up private schools. So for example, look right here, the darker blue ones, those are the states where the overrepresentation is worse. So the South, for example. So here's like, pretty much 30%. So if in Tennessee, for example, 60% of students are white, and there's a 30% rate of overrepresentation, that means in Tennessee, 90% of private schools are full of white students. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, the graph, it takes a second to like wrap your head around, but it just shows the fact that private schools across the United States are very, very heavily filled by white students, and often these schools do have extra funding, do have extra resources. We'll talk about that. All right, so what are the consequences of the inequity that we've been speaking about? So one of the main things is limited access to higher education. So those green boxes that we were looking at before in the overview of the academic system. So oftentimes students in more impoverished school districts suffer from lower graduation rates. This is due to all the things we were talking about, like larger class sizes, no extracurriculars, less resources, bad facilities. It's just a less pleasurable school environment to want to be a part of. And then also a huge one is lack of college preparation. So oftentimes, for example, private schools often have college counselors and courses for test prep. So when students are doing the process of applying to colleges in private schools or in public schools with more funding, like wealthier public schools, they have more access, they have more support to be able to help their college process. So because of that, they get into colleges at a much higher rate than students from these other like districts or so. Yeah. And then obviously there's a lot of employment challenges because if you do suffer from a lack of a quality education, it can be harder to get employed. Or if you're not able to access higher education, like if you're not able to get into university, maybe you don't even envision that for yourself, it's going to be more difficult to secure good employment with a higher wage as well. So what we often see and what we refer to is this cycle of poverty, where students are coming from less affluent areas and they are in less affluent schools, and because of that they get less affluent jobs, and this cycle just repeats itself unless we put in policies about equity to like level out these
Sorry, something similar happens in Argentina. Not related to race, because here we don't have this mixture of Black Americans, Hispanics, but we especially have it in relation to social classes. Yes? So, the students who go to private schools or bilingual schools or schools with more resources then have a better education, and then they have more opportunities to enter university, to succeed at university than students from other backgrounds that do not have access to quality education. Yes?
Yeah, it's very similar. It's the same process of like the cycle of poverty repeating itself, but as you're saying, in the United States, as shown in the statistics and just throughout our history, people of color are just overrepresented in these classes, and so
and I don't know if you know, Casey, but here, for example, in Córdoba, there are very few schools that are public schools, that is that you don't have to pay, and that they are good schools. Most of public schools are not so good schools. Okay?
Yeah.
There are very few. For example, Montserrat, but there are just very few, 2 or 3 schools that are public and are good. It's very difficult for people to not have
yeah, so that's I'll clarify that. So that's one of the reasons that like this historical process of like segregational like zoning and zoning laws that have barred specifically like Black communities and communities of color from living in certain neighborhoods is so effective today because we do have a system where you have to live in a school district in order to go there. So for example, the school district that I grew up in had good public schools and had good funding, and so some of the students would actually lie about their addresses and come. But it was sad and scary because often they would get found out and then they would get taken out. But like that's how coveted it was to be in a good school district with good funding, because it can really, especially when you're a child, it can make or break your life. It can make or break your education. So yeah, people would lie about their addresses in order to go to a public school in a certain district.
And we even see here at the School of Languages, when we want to do the position test on web university, we see the different levels of English, from a person who could go to a private school or a bilingual school, or even these English institutes that those who come from public schools with very poor level of English.
Yeah.
Sorry for all.
No, I'm enjoying this. I like it more as a conversation. Yes. Yes. Yeah, so there's two questions there. So in terms of athletics, there are things that are like athletic scholarships. So actually one of my closest friends, she had like a full athletic scholarship, so she went to 5-year university for free because she's like really fast, which is just kind of funny. Like it's kind of funny, objectively, yeah. We always joke about it, like, oh, she's that for free just because you ran really fast. But anyways, the military one is a very interesting question. Oftentimes with the U.S. military, if you agree to enlist, they will pay for your college. I think it's after you serve. I think it's after you serve. But the huge problem with that is then people in the lower classes in the United States are getting disproportionately targeted to join the U.S. military. So it is like difficult, especially because obviously joining the military, especially if you're deployed, you're overseas, there's a lot of opportunity for PTSD, physical injury. Probably not the best for your mental health. So, yeah.
And here in Argentina, many young boys join the military force also because they come from poor backgrounds. And when you join the military force, you have a place to live, they give you food, they give you everything. So many of them joined also the forces because of that, because they have food and housing.
Yeah. We just have this slide. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to touch on, thank you all for the discussion and the questions. It's been really interesting. It's specifically relating to the point on equity. There's been some interesting developments in the recent years about a certain policy geared towards providing equity, which is affirmative action. Have you heard of this term?
Yes.
Okay.
It is in the presentation.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Good.
Got it. Yeah. So affirmative action just meaning a set of procedures designed to eliminate unlawful discrimination among applicants, specifically to colleges and universities in the U.S., and to kind of level out the prior discrimination throughout history based on certain groups of people, and prevent discrimination. So just kind of like race-conscious, class-conscious admissions into these schools, where that's taken under consideration. Specifically, like also students who are maybe first generation and their families to go to universities and things like that. So not during the Trump presidency, but after, as a result of the fact that the entire Supreme Court was taken over by the justices that you appointed, pretty much. In 2023, the Supreme Court gutted affirmative action, ending these race-conscious admissions due to a lot of, rhetoric of like reverse racism, things like that. And then more recently with Trump's newer term, Trump's term now, he's actually been ordering colleges to share this admissions data with his team so that he can keep an eye out on the fact that if like any sort of affirmative action policies are still being carried out. So this has huge implications for students who these policies were obviously helping. Students from all these districts that we were talking about that were underfunded, underprivileged. So this is kind of a huge slap in the face against equitable policies in the United States. And so I just wanted to, provide that context as we're talking about this.
But remember that there are also the other side of the coin. Yes, the advantages of the
disadvantages of the affirmative action since it started to be implemented, because some of the people say that it created reverse discrimination. So that's another thing.
Yeah. All right. So then, just to conclude, we looked at the way that segregation persists in the modern day, across races and across classes. Perhaps, maybe in education, it might be the most clear way in which segregation is still persisting in the United States, most blatant and obvious form of that. We took a look at the gaps in funding, why this happens, the impacts of these gaps in funding and disparities, and then also some recent political rhetoric for the Trump administration in undermining policies towards social justice, policies of equity. So yeah, that is the presentation.
Very much, Katie. I think that was very
Consuelo,
Yes.
excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
How are you?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's.
Is it for Katie?
Yeah, it's for this topic as regard, the concept of equity. So, can we say that, we can talk, or we can start talking about equity in USA education, in 1980s, maybe because for the affirmative action? Because in the post-war period in 1965, there was a higher education act, but I think that in this period we cannot talk about.
You have to consider.
Yeah.
Equality is giving the same access to everybody. The same access to the same resources, the same schools, the same everything. Okay? And equity is helping a disadvantaged person reach the same level. So maybe that person, in order to reach the same level, needs more resources or needs more help. For example, children with disabilities, for example, children with special needs, for example, and there were aspects in relation to that, and you have them in the presentation. The same happens in the UK, okay? So you have to see if the legislation passed, okay, aimed at equality or equity, okay? Yes, so you have to consider, for example, Johnson, yes, and the access to education was that equality or equity. Then with Bush, yes, then with Obama, remember studying every Student Act,
It's an initiative.
yes. So you have to see that whenever you consider something that the government applies, a policy or a piece of legislation, if it aimed or if it fosters equality, equity, none of them, both of them, okay? In some cases you can say, well, it promoted equality in this sense, and it also promoted equity in this sense, or none of them. Okay.
Next in person session, I think. Session, no fun.
Una serie per il pelo.